Hello and welcome to Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer. I am your host, Jeff Seltzer. Once again, for the second week in a row, we're officially sponsored by the good people over at jeffseltzer.com. For all your Jeff Seltzer needs, feel free to check us out over at jeffseltzer.com. With that said, I've gotten a lot of great feedback about the last couple of weeks of shows. Last week, had an awesome show with Daniel and Marcus. A lot of great feedback, a lot of new listeners, which I always love to hear about. So thank you so much. If you are a new listener, appreciate it. Definitely keep sharing the love, keep talking about the show. Lots of repeat listeners as well. So anybody who comes back week after week after week, totally appreciate it. A reminder to all of our new listeners. It's probably not a reminder because it's the first time you're hearing this. But we do have, this is episode 29. So we've been on almost weekly since the middle of July of 2024. Every episode may not be for you. Just take a look in Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Look for a topic you like and take a listen. I mean, we've got everything from professional wrestling to Disney World to immigrating to the United States to pretty much anything you could think of. We've probably done a show about. If there's a show that we haven't done yet that you're interested in, let me know. Shoot me a DM over on Instagram at Everybody Has a Story Pod. Would love to hear your story or hear about a topic that you want to talk about. With that said, I did want to talk a little bit about local businesses, which, I mean, it's very interesting kind of how they work. So you would think from a local business perspective, they would do everything they can to try to, get local love and kind of like take care of people in the area and not try to, let's say, take advantage of consumers. Quick story that I have about what happened this past weekend to myself and to my daughter. So going back about 8 months or so, last summer, in preparation for my older daughter to get a driver's license, I bought a used 2014 Honda for my daughter. So that way when she turns 17, she'd be able to drive it and, everything would be good. So she got her license in October, which is really awesome. Definitely been life-changing for us. She drove probably about 1,000 miles or so between the time she got her license and this past weekend. One of the headlights went out, felt like it was maybe time to get an oil change. So we brought it back to the dealer that we bought the car at because they do services as well. We drop it off for an oil change. We're hanging out. Remember, we drove 1,000 miles since we first bought the car. After about 15, 20 minutes, somebody comes out and gives us a whole laundry list of items they think should be repaired. Told probably about $1,500 or $2,000 worth of various maintenances, including getting the brakes repaired, getting new spark plugs, getting all sorts of stuff. And one point that really got my attention was the fact that it said that coolant was leaking because there's all sorts of issues in, I guess, the underbelly of the car. Again, I know absolutely nothing about this stuff, so I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, so this feels really weird. So what you're telling me is after 1,000 miles, we need to have all of this maintenance done. And so the lady leaves for a few minutes, comes back, and she's like, you know what? We didn't realize that the car only had 1,000 miles, so you don't need any of these, except for this thing about the coolant leaking, because it says this coolant was leaking really badly. So you really should take care of that before something bad happens to your car. And I said, well, I mean, we didn't drive the car that much. We haven't seen any kind of leaking under the car in the driveway. So how badly is it really leaking? This really doesn't feel right. And I'm not so sure about what's going on. Again, I have no idea about cars. So I'm just asking questions to understand, do I really need to pay all this money to get the car fixed? Or, is someone trying to pull my leg here? So she leaves, comes back another 15 minutes later with a picture of the inside of the car and says, you know what, never mind, it's fine. We should try to keep an eye on it. There's no leaking and everything is fine. Your cost is going to be $88 for the oil change and the new headlight. At which point I was just furious. I was like, you know what, it is what it is. It's fine. Paid my $88, left, and obviously did what every, middle-aged, old man does. I went on Facebook and ranted to anybody who listened to me about it. So I went to my local Rockaway Township Facebook group and had a whole rant talking about my story. And, I obviously learned a lot from this. Half the people are like, yeah, that dealership stinks. I've been there before. I won't ever go there again. You had a few people who were like, yeah, I don't believe you. This is silly. Why wouldn't, maybe there's issues with the car. Who knows? I had one guy told me that I should go to, a hardware store, buy the parts myself, go on YouTube and fix the car. I think they kind of missed the point there. First of all, I'm not a DIYer, as I've probably stated in the past, so it is what it is. With all that said, I wasn't really happy with the, obviously, with what I got from the dealership. Facebook, for the most part, kind of, did what Facebook does. And most people were like, yeah, you're right. We shouldn't use that place. Go to a local mechanic, whatever else like that. And then I was going to kind of put it to rest. But then Sunday morning, I got an email, one of the standard emails from the dealership saying, hey, you took the car for an oil change yesterday. We'd love if you gave us all 5s on the survey for the performance of how the repairs went. So I immediately basically copied and pasted what I put on Facebook, and then added a paragraph at the end thanking them for helping me teach my daughter a lesson that not everybody in this world is good. Some will try to take advantage of you, and you should always ask questions to understand what's happening, because if you don't, some people, such as this car dealership, will try to take all your money. So with all that said, I probably will not be attending that car dealership / service place ever again. I'm not looking to throw them out here on this podcast, but if you find me on Facebook or in the Rockaway Township Everything Rockaway Facebook group, you could probably find more information about my issue. So life goes on. It is what it is. I got to find a new mechanic, but here we are at this point. With that said, I did want to remind everybody that we are on all major podcast platforms. We're on video on Spotify. We're video on YouTube. From an audio perspective, we're also on Apple. We are on Amazon, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Good Pods, and anywhere else you can find a podcast. If there's a place you can't find us, let me know, and I'll do whatever I can do. I said earlier, the Instagram for the show is at Everybody Has a Story Pod. My personal Instagram is at Seltzer77 for all things Jeff Seltzer. You can always check me out at jeffseltzer.com. You can reach the show directly via email at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. If you have any business inquiries, want to send me something, you want to talk about something or whatever, definitely send a note there. Outside of that, I think I'm ready to introduce the guest for this week. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest, who is Kim Hunter. Kim, how are you today?
Hi, Jeff. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. So first of all, thank you so much for joining the show. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Appreciate it. So for those of you at home or in your car or wherever you might be who don't know who Kim Hunter is, so a little background. So Kim and I first met about 15 years ago, which is crazy because I don't feel like either of us are old enough to know anybody for 15 years.
No.
But we met at work years and years ago, and she's on the show this week to talk about some of her journeys and also about some of her hobbies. So Kim, if you don't mind telling the people listening a little bit about yourself, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Kim Hunter. Like Jeff said, we work together. I'm in marketing, in corporate. A little bit of background. I grew up in Minnesota for the better part of my life. Texas born, Minnesota raised, and New Jersey transplant. So I've kind of been all over. I moved here. I moved to New Jersey in 2010 and never left. So I think I qualify as a New Jersey girl now, so I'm told. But yeah, in the course of kind of moving across the country, I have picked up a lot of hobbies. I'm an avid photographer. I love to travel. I've had a couple of kids in the time that I've been here, have a husband and children, and we go all over the place. They're really good subjects for photography as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I think I fall under like the corporate hippie title, where I've kind of got this corporate side and also all these random hobbies. So
awesome. So that's a lot of bullets that we're going to try to dig into throughout the show. Definitely a lot to unpack there. Even a few things I learned there along that little blurb you had there. So thank you for sharing. Definitely some more notes for me to either take down or go after my intern for doing not enough research, I guess. But we'll get to that. So with that said, the topic for this week's show is photography. So for those that don't know, Kim is an amazing photographer. She has an Instagram page. On her Instagram, she has posted many, many pictures, all sorts of styles, all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of topics over the years. So first of all, I guess I want to take a step back and ask him, when was the first time, I guess, what's your earliest memories of photography, right? So obviously nowadays digital, is basically the way that it is, but, I'm an old man and I get that. You're younger than I am, but, you probably grew up in, I'd imagine, the real film stage, the disposable cameras, stuff like that, before digital was a thing. So what are your earliest memories of photography and like what got you interested in it?
Yeah, so I guess my earliest memories would be taking photography classes in high school. I don't really remember being into it before that, but I just thought it was so fascinating, like composition and developing images out of what I see every day. I think what really kind of catapulted me into being very interested in photography was more in the digital age. But I remember there's a big kind of arboretum greenhouse in Minnesota that it's called the St. Paul Conservatory. It's this huge greenhouse with all these beautiful plants. So I went there with my uncle, who's very into photography, and we brought our cameras, our digital, just like little digital point and shoot cameras. And he said something which was that you look at the world differently with a camera in your hand. And so we walked around this conservatory and I was like, wow, that is so true. You really start to look at where you're at very differently with a camera in your hand. You look at the angle of this flower and the light is hitting it in a certain way. And, you know, when you're looking at it to capture it, it makes walking through really anywhere a little bit of a different experience. So that's kind of the first time that I realized that photography was something more than just snapping pictures.
Nice. That's really awesome. And again, thank you for sharing. So your uncle was, I guess, sounds like your first real kind of like, I don't want to say role model, but like, you know, your first influence from a photography perspective. Before this experience you had with him at the observatory, were you aware of his interests in photography? Had you seen his work, or was this kind of the first time you both kind of bonded over it?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the first time that I realized that he had an interest in it as well. He lived in Texas, so we didn't hang out a lot before he moved to Minnesota anyway. So this was kind of one of the first things that we realized, hey, we have that in common. So
Nice. And let me ask you
yeah.
this, going even before that. So you mentioned in high school you started doing some photography. So was that kind of like an old school camera, and you were processing and developing the film like in school, or kind of like what was that process like?
Yeah, it was just a class in school. So we were kind of wandering around our school grounds with film cameras.
Yep.
And I still remember the picture that I still remember like the pictures that I took. Like it was like leaves on the ground and shadows and, you know, things, just silly little things that we found around. But it was film to dark room, like kind of start to finish class, which I thought was really fascinating, which is a lot harder than digital photography, let me tell you. I don't think I would want to go back and like maybe I'll have a film era. I don't know, but it was a lot of work.
No, I totally get it. So I mean,
Yeah.
again, like you know, I'm a few years older than you are, so I experience photography in different ways. So taking a step back, so when I was in college, I worked in a CVS for about 3 years. During some of that time, I worked in the 1 hour photo in the CVS, which again, I wasn't great. It was very easy training, I guess. Side story, or I guess, you know, a side quest, I guess, conversation on that is I was working there during the summer of 1999. Not sure if listeners remember, but Woodstock 99 took place during the summer of 99. So there were many you know, let's say a person who came in with lots of film to get developed from Woodstock 99. And I saw some crazy stuff, let me tell you. Some ridiculous things that, as how old was I at the time? 99, I was 21, 22. So, I mean, I guess I was old enough to see the stuff I was seeing that I was developing, but it was definitely some crazy nonsense. And unless there's something
unsee it.
You can't. And unless it's something illegal, like we were basically told, like just go with it, process it, put it in the envelope and sell it to them. So, I mean, I didn't know any better at the time, kind of was what it was. And then fast forwarding a couple of years later, so I got married in 2004, and digital photography really hadn't fully taken off yet. So our photographer was one of those traditional like film photographers. Now, the challenge was, or the issue was, I think our photographer might have had a little too much to drink at our wedding, because he ended up exposing about half the pictures from our wedding. So there were many pictures that, let's say my wife and I were both heartbroken over the fact that we never really got, because when they were developed, they had these huge spots on them, just didn't look right. So to your point from before, I am thankful to the transition over to digital, because I mean, years ago, you get 36 or 24 pictures on a roll. You take them, you hope for the best. You got a picture in front of the Grand Canyon. If you get home and the picture didn't come out, well, you lost your Grand Canyon picture, and that's kind of where it is, right? Versus now, you take the picture, you look at it, looks fine, you're great. Otherwise, take 74 pictures, find the best one, and go with it. So definitely from a overall like finished product perspective, I'm super happy with where we've kind of gotten to today,
For sure. Yeah. I do remember like the 24 to 28 pictures that you would have. So you really had to like want to take that picture.
Oh, you did.
Just snapping around. Yeah.
You did. And when I was in college, I mean, most of the listeners know I'm a huge professional wrestling fan. Like, I would go to wrestling shows like once a month, and I would bring like 3 or 4 rolls of film. So the amount this would cost me between buying the film, getting the film developed, and only having about 6 pictures that actually look good at the end of the day, it was mind numbing. Versus nowadays, you bring your, worst case, you bring your iPhone to a wrestling show, take some pictures, right away what you have, and it didn't cost you anything incrementally. So it's amazing what technology does,
Absolutely. What a time to be alive. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so you went to the observatory with your uncle. You learned a lot about it. You found your love for photography. At that point, did you have like a fancy camera? Like, what were you using, and kind of like how was the evolution of Kim Hunter's like camera, like I guess ownership?
Yeah. So, yeah, I started like every other elder millennial with a point and shoot Sony like Coolpix camera. So, use that. I had like my little point and shoot, just one of those little kind of cameras, for ages. I was always taking pictures. I've got 1,000 pictures from college and school and trips to my grandparents. Like I've got thousands of pictures from that era.
I'm sure.
When I moved to New Jersey, I moved here. I didn't know anybody. I had never been here before, and so I was like, well, I don't have any friends, so I should probably get a hobby. So, in between exploring where I lived and working and all that.
Of course.
So I actually bought my first DSLR camera when I around the first year that I moved here. So had a lot of pictures of like my cats, and I would go out to New York City or I would drive to the beach. And so I was not great at DSLR camera at first, but that was 10 years ago. So I had that first camera for probably eight years, I would say. So I rocked it was a Canon Rebel T3.
Nice.
Camera was my first camera. Yep. My first big camera.
Yep.
So I eventually, once I started like Googling, how do I make my pictures look like that? The good pictures.
Of course.
People would talk about things like lenses, and they would talk about things like editing. And so it was really just a process of knowing that I was interested in it and using it as kind of a catalyst to explore my new home.
Yep.
And also identifying that I wanted to take pictures like that, like these professional pictures, and just searching and trying and buying new things to try and do what the professionals do.
Of course.
So I evolved. I actually recently I upgraded my camera recently. I have too many lenses. I'm like Lightroom, all of this stuff. I actually have not really gotten super into editing though. So I'm a very light touch on editing. I prefer to do a lot of the work with lenses, camera, and composition.
Nice.
And light. So yeah, I've steadily over the course of the last 14 years or so, just done a lot of Googling and a lot of trial and error to get better, I guess, at photography.
So that's amazing. Yeah. So a couple things to unpack there. If I were to use, corporate jargon, let's say.
Yes.
So obviously, like as Kim had mentioned earlier, you moved cross country from Minnesota to New Jersey on your own, right? So we'll get into that in a few minutes. But I think it's fascinating the fact that you came here by yourself. Obviously, you found your own place. You were working and such like that. But I mean, when you're a new person in a new town, you don't know anybody. You have a lot of free time, right? Because at this point, your friend group's not there or your family's not around, stuff like that. So I think it's amazing that you basically said, you know what, I have all this free time. I'm gonna find a hobby that I already kind of like. I'm gonna get good at it. I'm gonna research it. I'm gonna do stuff with it. And it sounds like during that time you took a lot of pictures in the city, pictures of your cats, all sorts of stuff, whatever. And like you just kind of fine-tuned what you were already enjoying before and kind of making the most of it, which is great. I mean, some people could have sat in the room and just kind of drank and felt sorry for themselves or kind of figured things out. But I mean, like you were productive with the time, which is fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I was like enthralled by New Jersey. I was like, the beach is right there and New York City is right there. So it was like the perfect combination to I guess take up photography in this lovely place.
That is pretty awesome. So before going deeper into photography in like the later years, so I guess getting back to my initial topic that I was thinking about too. So you were living in Minnesota, I assume, with your family, with your friends, whatever else like that. And one day you decide, hey, I want to work for company X. I'm not going to name them right now, and not X as in Twitter, but as in a company that Kim and I both worked at 15 years ago. Like, what in your mind kind of like triggered that said, you know what, I'd like to move halfway across the country for this opportunity and kind of go to New Jersey, which obviously, you know, culturally is very different than Minnesota. Weather-wise is very different. And also obviously leaving your support group. Like what went through your mind that kind of got you to make that decision?
Yeah, what was I thinking? So what had happened and how this all transpired was I had been looking for a new, like I was working for a company, I was looking for a new job, and I was working with recruiters. And so I was going on interviews. I had no intention of looking anywhere except around where I had lived in Minnesota. I had one of the recruiters said, I've got a crazy opportunity for you. It's in New Jersey. They'll fly you out for the interview. Just go on the interview. Just do it. It's a
So
good
like
experience.
I get a free trip to Jersey. I could check it out. I've nothing to lose, right?
I was like, you know what? Sure, fine.
Yeah.
I'll go to New Jersey. So
Yeah.
I went from Newark Airport to the company and back to the airport all in one day.
Okay.
It was a horrible day. It was just a long day.
It was a one-day round trip from
horrible.
Minnesota to Jersey, back to Minnesota. So you basically
Correct.
you woke up in your bed and you went to bed in your bed.
That is correct. So
That's a
that is
long
the
day.
only time I had ever stepped foot into New Jersey.
Wow.
So I went on the interview. I ended up getting the job, and so, well, they ended up offering me the job.
Yes.
And I would love to say that there was some kind of like contemplation that went into it, but I think what went through my head was YOLO, and sure, why not? So I said yes, and I was like, how hard could it be? I can do this. I can go to New Jersey. Sure.
Yeah.
So I packed up my cats, packed up my house, and at this point I was scared of flying, so my dad drove across the country with me and my cats to drop me off in New Jersey.
Nice.
For my new life.
Very cool.
I ended up staying in temporary housing for 3 months because I had no idea what towns were here or where I should live. So I would just park my car every weekend when I lived in temporary housing. I would park my car in different cities that people told me I should live in.
Okay.
And like check out the vibe to see where I wanted to live.
Yeah.
Hoboken was crazy. Like people said Hoboken. I was like, I can't go from Minnesota to like Hoboken.
That's a culture shock. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. So I ended up like in a nice little town in North Jersey, and yeah, I was basically just like raising my hand. I was like, I will hang out with anybody who wants to be my friend. So I ended up making. I made really random friends. I met a guy, like a guy who had a daughter my age on a plane, and he was like, my daughter just moved there. Do you want her email? And I was like, sure, of course. So, you know, started hanging out with random people like that. I met other people who had just moved here.
Right.
I played intramural sports and ended up meeting my husband a year later, and the rest is history. Now I've had 2 children here, and and
here we are, right?
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, the contrast that I would make is, you know, obviously you, as you said before, you were born in Texas, grew up in Minnesota, and then moved to New Jersey 15 years ago. Again, you know, all, you know, leaving your family, leaving your friends, stuff like that. Contrast that to me. I've been living in Jersey now since I was 5. I think it was like 1982. My family moved here. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York. We moved to Chicago for like a year or 2. Then moved back to Brooklyn for like a year, and then moved to New Jersey. And I've been in New Jersey now, I guess I'm 47. So I guess you're talking 42 years at this point. I grew up in Jersey, grew up in Edison, went to Rutgers, which was like 2 towns over from Edison. I've worked up and down New Jersey ever since I graduated college. So it's definitely very 2 different journeys, right? Like you've been in 3 different states, I guess 2 time zones, right? Both Texas and Minnesota are central, right?
Central, yeah.
Central, yeah. I've grown up here. I've worked here. I've lived here. Met my wife here. For me, I've never really had any, I guess, reason to leave. I mean, I guess the industry that we both work in, the lion's share of headquarters are in this area up in North Jersey, which definitely works out. So, I mean, my mindset is make as much money as I can here, retire, and then move to Disney World. So, well, that's the plan. We'll see how that goes. Do you see yourself, I don't want to be morbid, but like dying in New Jersey, or do you think at some point you'll end up moving somewhere else?
That's a good question. I mean, so my husband is from here, like originally, but he's he went up to Massachusetts for college. You know, he studied abroad. He like road tripped to California for months. So he's got a little bit of the wandering genes as well, I guess.
Sure.
So I think we'll probably stay put for now.
Yep.
But in the future, I think we're like definitely open to moving. I think moving is like, I underestimated how hard it would be, honestly.
Right.
Like it is
Yeah.
really hard because I was like, I still have friends, you know, I still go on girls trips with my friends from grade school in
Sure.
Minnesota, you know,
Yeah.
like you always keep those connections. But it is really hard to be like just you and your suitcases and your cats and your camera to be like, what do I do now? But I would move again. Like, I think I'm intrigued by not just visiting places, but kind of digging in and getting to like know the local grocery store and the doing the things that the locals do in a place, not just like hitting touristy hotspots necessarily, which you kind of get with traveling. So
yeah,
I think it like changes you in inconceivable ways when you move.
I'm sure it does. I mean, for me, I'd say it's just very traumatic to pack up and like even just like move to a different house or different apartment. My wife and I have both been in this house now for almost 20 years at this point, which is crazy. We bought this house back in December of 05. So this year will be the 20th anniversary of living in this house, which is nuts because I'm looking at it and I'm like, I've lived in this house for almost half my life, a little bit less from math perspective. But I mean, basically all of my adult life for the most part, outside of a few apartments, I guess. But like the thought of when we eventually do retire and move somewhere else, just packing up this house, like I have nightmares about that because like we've accumulated so much stuff. I mean, you know, when we moved in here, we didn't have kids yet. We didn't have a lot of furniture or even a lot of money at that point. So we didn't have a lot of stuff. The house was very empty. Now between the attic, between the closets and everything else like that, just the thought of taking everything down from the walls and packing up even like the computer I'm talking on right now, like packing up this Macintosh computer, like Apple computer, whatever else like that, like kind of stuff like that just really stresses me out just thinking about it, you know?
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Like moving sucks. It does. It's pretty bad. Like we've moved, I've moved like 5 times maybe since I've lived in New Jersey, but I've always been kind of a hopper, I guess. So
okay.
I figured out once I moved to New Jersey, I was doing the math and I actually moved houses every single year since I graduated high school. So like in college, I lived in a different house every year. And after college, I lived in different houses every year. So
and when you live in a house, like I see like in your background, you have pictures on the wall and such, like, do you fully like move in and unpack? Or do you have the mindset of like, hey, I'm going to leave in a year, so I'm not going to like hang stuff up or whatever? Like, what's your general thought process there?
No, I've always been a nester. Like I'm a home maker, just like by compulsion, I guess.
Sure.
So yeah, I always nest and then re-nest somewhere else.
That is crazy. So again, let's go back a couple of years and let's test Kim Hunter's memory here. So I left the company that we worked at together in May of 2011. We didn't fully, I guess, see each other again until I started working at the current company that we're at. Let's say it was probably spring of 2020-ish, give or take.
Yeah.
We ran into each other one time in between then, between 2011 and 2020. Do you remember where we met again and what, like, or any details about it?
This was not the Everclear concert, was it?
This was the Everclear concert.
Was it?
Yes.
Oh my God. I can't believe I remember that. I just I had like a random Instagram post pop up in my head.
So to clear the air for everybody listening, so again, I left the company we worked at together in May of 11, and we started working again like 9 years later at a different company together. So it was Father's Day of 2015, June of 2015.
Was it? Oh my
It
gosh.
was, yeah. Because I remember the company I was working at the time had about a month earlier announced layoffs that they were moving. They're closing the Jersey office and moving everybody to, spoiler alert, to Minnesota. Yes.
That was your chance, Jeff.
That was my chance. They said, you can move to Lakeview, Minnesota. And I was like, no, thank you. That was not going to happen. I was like, those cold winters, I I went there a lot in my previous lives, and I had zero interest in that. Plus, my wife works here. Kids were in school here. It just wasn't something I was looking for. So it was Father's Day 2015, June of 2015. It was an awesome concert. It was Everclear, who else? Fuel, American Hi-Fi, and there were a couple other bands too.
Yeah.
I randomly, I remember Beth, my wife, and I were just kind of walking around the lobby, and I don't remember who recognized who. You might recognize me or vice versa. But like, it was a very like hey, how's it going? It's been a while. Because at that point, it was like 4 years or so. And I mean, everyone always says that I basically look the same, like maybe older, but same face and everything else like that. So I'm fairly recognizable. But for me, it was just a funny situation that like, I just remember, like, I remember a lot of things about that day. Like Beth and I bought the package where we actually met Everclear before the concert. So Beth and I have a picture with, and again, Everclear that we saw wasn't really Everclear. It was the lead singer plus a bunch of other guys. But we have a picture with the lead singer, which is pretty cool. Like we met him, got a picture with him. They actually did a song for us before they opened the doors. So it was one of those like VIP package deals. It was cool.
That's awesome.
It was a lot of fun. It was really cool. The drummer, actually the lead singer for American Hi-Fi was the drummer for Everclear for that show, because I guess they didn't have another drummer for the show. So he was kind of doing his thing. Spoiler alert for anybody who doesn't know at home. Also, that same guy who was the lead singer for American Hi-Fi and the drummer for Everclear was originally the drummer for Letters to Cleo, which was a band about 30 years ago that I saw when I was at Rutgers. So there was that. They also opened for REM once, I think, as well. I don't know. In any event, wow. that was our little reunion, and then we said hello, goodbye, and then I guess 5 years later, saw each other again in the corporate world, and here we are, right?
Yep, it's that New Jersey circuit.
It's a 6 degrees of separation. It's funny. Yeah. I always make the joke with people when they say, when you say the podcast is called "Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer," does that mean everyone literally has a story with Jeff Seltzer, like 6 degrees of separation, or is it like everybody has a story they want to share with Jeff Seltzer? So that's something I'm still kind of going back and forth. Punctuation can kind of drive it. I don't know. I'm still not really there as we're 6 months into it, but one day I'll probably figure it out.
It's a great question. It never occurred to me, but yeah.
Yeah, one of my daughters. I'll figure it out. One of my daughters called it out to me. I think it was after the first or second episode. I was like, now you tell me this after I've already put out the branding and I've already got the podcast set up. But I guess it'll be one of those things where I'll ask every guest, like, do you have a story with me, or do you want to share a story with me? What's happening here? I'm not really sure.
Or both.
Could be a little of each.
Fine.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, in the corporate world, I've been with how many companies in the last 25 years? There are a lot of people that I know or know my wife or whatever. I mean, us, right? Like, we've worked now for 2 different companies over the course of 15 years together, which is crazy, right?
It's crazy. Yeah, people come out of left and right. You're like, what? You see people at the airport and you're like, why do I know you? And it's like, oh, we probably work together at some point. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Or they're like, hey, this is our new person who works here named such and such. I'm like, oh, I know such and such. They're like, obviously you know such and such. Jeff, why wouldn't you, right? It's just the way that it goes.
Exactly.
Another piece of trivia for those listening at home or wherever you're listening at right now. So when Kim and I worked at at said company 15 years ago, there was a little TV show called Glee that was on the air. Something that I've eventually revisited with my older daughter, and we watched every single episode, I think multiple times over the last 3 or 4 years. But this was the time before like streaming of like Spotify or Apple Music was really a thing. You had to like buy a la carte songs, or you had to buy CDs, or I guess maybe records weren't really back yet at that point. But you had to actually buy all the music that you had. You wouldn't pay for a subscription. So every week, what Glee would do was whatever songs were on the episode, they would then sell like a playlist, like through Apple Music or iTunes. I guess it was iTunes at the time. So what would happen was, and again, anybody listening at home who has, I guess, issues with sharing music or whatever, maybe turn us off at this point. But what I would do is I would buy the songs. So I was actually buying the songs, and then I would give them to Kim. And at work, we would listen to the songs from Glee, which was amazing. I mean, it was great cover songs. It was lots of fun.
So good.
It was so diverse. I mean, even listening to it like 15 years later, like it still rocks. Like it's still great just covers, I would say.
Yeah, I think it was iconic, actually, is I think the word we can use for that. Totally iconic.
Absolutely.
Every song.
Absolutely. I thought a lot about it too, because like I said, I started rewatching or rebinging the shows right before my older daughter started high school. Largely because I thought she's probably in the right age group for it. She liked the music and such like that. She was really into Pitch Perfect because I got her into that as well. Awesome movie. So we started, just binging that or whatever. And so like, it's funny, when she started high school, she was like, oh, they're the Cheerios, referring to the cheerleaders, like in Glee, and like stuff like that. Like that was kind of her mindset, because she didn't really have a point of reference. That was pretty much it. So
yeah,
that was fun. Did you ever end up watching the show, or was the music hit for you?
Yeah, no, I was watching the show as well. but the music was like, I think I was more into the music than the plot of the show. And
Yes.
now, like, I'm literally going to go on iTunes after this or on Apple Music after this and make some playlists because, like, yeah, that was a good era of music was the Glee soundtrack.
Yeah, it's
It's
funny because like
happening.
yeah, when it was on live, I think I watched the first like 2 seasons and I kind of bailed because like to your point from before, the story's kind of like up and down. I didn't love it, but the music was great. So
Yeah.
I think I probably watched the first 2 seasons a few times. But then when I started watching it with my daughter, we watched it straight through, and that was the first time that I saw it right to the end. So
How
like
many seasons are there?
this is like 5 or 6. Like by the end, Demi Lovato was on like half a season.
Oh,
Adam Lambert was on like half a season. So like some of the like American Idol types, whatever. It was amazing. Like Adam Lambert was great. Eventually he left the show because I think he became the lead singer for Queen, which was just amazing.
I mean, again, iconic. No
Yeah.
notes.
So
Amazing.
so great. I mean, I would say it has ups and downs. Music was fantastic. Could I ever re-binge it again? I don't think so. But my daughter, she's 17, absolutely loves it still. Like it's her show.
Yeah.
And there's like an episode for everything. So anytime she's feeling something, like I respect and appreciate the fact that she has something she could connect with. And I was really excited that I was able to kind of share that with her, which was, super awesome.
Yeah. The kids love all that old stuff that we that we used to like these days.
It's true. Although I will
Yeah.
say, so she started watching when she was maybe 13 or 14, and there were definitely a few topics or episodes that as we're watching it together that I didn't remember, I was like, ooh, is this going to be weird watching this topic with her? Or maybe, this isn't the right age for her or whatever, but everything was fine. I mean,
It's
we
all
got
fun.
through it. She's mature enough about it and it was fun. So it was good.
Yeah. Nice.
Absolutely. Last topic for the day, because I know we've talked about a lot of things today. So, a little trivia for anybody out there. Kim does have a master's degree in sustainability. My question for you is, what does that mean?
What?
What is sustainability? I know I recycle.
Explain.
I recycle. I've worked on products, or I've worked on projects at work where we work on quote sustainability, and I get it from like a macro level perspective. But getting a master's degree in sustainability, I would assume, is probably lots of classes and lots of different like dynamics or views on it. Like, what does that mean? Like, what do you? You're not going and recycling all day. Like, what are you doing in sustainability class?
True. It is a little more than recycling. Well,
Yes,
I can rewind a little bit and just like talk a little bit about why I did that too, if
sure. That sounds
if,
great.
if that works.
Of course.
Just so like in the corporate world, I was like I had a little bit of a moment where I was like, I would love to make a difference in the world, right? Like it was like 2020. It was maybe an existential crisis. I don't know. But I was
COVID's
like,
hitting, and you're like, I want to save
yeah,
this world before it dies, right?
I would like to do something.
Yes.
Um, so just like photography, I realized I was like sustainability and the environment. If I look at what I'm reading in my spare time, that's kind of what I was gravitating towards. So I started looking into programs and wanted to make the link between business and sustainability because I knew that like businesses are going to keep operating anyway, and what I wanted to do was look at how I could make a difference in business and kind of make the world a better place. So the program that I ended up choosing was through Arizona State University. So Arizona State has a huge college of sustainability. They have an incredible like research program. So they're really top of the line, top rated. I think they might be number one in the U.S. and certainly top 10 or top five in the world for their sustainability program. But I did a master's degree in sustainability leadership, which means we focused a lot. A lot of the classwork was focused on things like what are the issues, what are the underlying factors of those issues. So things like how do you think about the plastic problem, right? Like, so how do you unpack that in a way that makes sense and that you can have a bias towards action and doing something about it. So
Yep.
there's a lot of saying like, how do you investigate the system that you're operating in? How do you project out future future scenarios of how this could play out? How do you influence? So a lot of influencing classes like storytelling, influencing, and then a lot of classes on like things like blanking. things on like resource management. So
Okay.
like how do you manage like natural resources, and what is the best way to create programs in say like a rainforest full of people who live there, right? So it was kind of making those ties between what is actually going on, how do you think about it, how do you unpack the problem, how do you influence and create solutions that not only take into account the situation, the environmental situation, but the imperative to continue to run business
Which
as
is
well.
awesome. Which is
Yeah.
really, really awesome. And thank you for sharing. It's funny because
Mhm.
like I got my master's degree in marketing back in 2006. I finished that. I don't know that sustainability was even a thing back then in terms of like what they would offer. It probably was not. I mean,
Probably
you
not.
also went to University of Arizona. For me, everything was, in person because in 2004, 5,
Mhm.
and 6, remote schooling wasn't a thing. Like if I'd waited 20 years or 15 years, whatever, it definitely would have been a very different dynamic. But at the same time, for me, and again, I admire this as well in you. Like Beth and I both got our masters at the same time before we got married and before we had kids, because we knew, going to school full time or part time while working full time while having kids or whatever else like that, it felt like a lot to lift at once. Based on doing some rough math here, you were already married and already had both kids by the time you went for your
Yeah,
graduate degree, right?
I did. Yeah.
What was that like, or kind of like, was there like, did you think about it and you're like, this is going to be really tough, but I want to do it? Kind of like, where was your head at when you kind of made that decision? And kind of like, I assume your husband was like super supportive and like, just take me through that
Yeah.
process in terms of like how you got to where you got to.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a juggle. If I had to say, how did I do it? Um, I don't I don't know that I could like pinpoint it. I just did it. I just
Right.
put one foot in front of the other. Um, but it was actually really helpful because it was online. So I knew that I could do things kind of at my own pace. And I also looked at my schedule, and we were fully in remote work at this point. So I did have like the time on either side of the day that would have normally been a commute, where, I've got a little bit of extra time during the day.
Of course.
Um, and it was very challenging. Like I did spend a lot of weekends, so it was weekly. You're doing things on a weekly basis. It's asynchronous, so you don't have to
Right.
attend a class at a certain time. So I could watch lectures in my own time. I was
Oh,
doing a
wow.
lot on weekends. It was kind of a cool program too, because it was people from around the world. It was a global program. So I
Awesome.
had to coordinate with people from my final project was with people from like Yemen and all over the place.
That's
So,
crazy. I mean,
um,
from a cultural perspective, like that sounds incredible because I'd imagine, sustainability means something different here versus over in, let's say, Yemen, right? So understanding different perspectives, different cultures, different political climates, like in terms of what's realistic, what's not, or whatever, I'd imagine that level in itself must have been really amazing, just kind of like experiencing it all at once.
yeah, it was, I mean, exactly. It was fascinating. It was eye-opening. It definitely solidified my interest in sustainability, but what it also did, so I went into it very concerned for the environment. Like I was like,
Okay.
uh-oh, I feel like we're not in a good place
Of
with
course.
climate change and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I left oddly hopeful because
Okay.
I actually saw through my professors were people who were like Arctic researchers and people who were like doing things out in the field in their free spare time.
Of course.
And I left actually with such a broader view of there are all these people across the entire world who care and know and want to make a difference. There are all these people across the world who are incredibly intelligent, working diligently to come up with solutions to make the world a better place. So it just opened my eyes to say, like, there's so many people working on it, so many people out there that care. And I came away feeling oddly hopeful.
Well, that's really awesome. I mean, and as a contrast or point of comparison, I guess I got my MBA or master's in marketing. It was fine. I was like 3 years into the workforce when I got it. I got some experiences, learned some stuff, but like it wasn't like a passion project for me. I remember I did have like a thesis or project I had to write about, like, if I were an entrepreneur, like what would my business be? And coincidentally, I don't think I mentioned this before to anybody on the podcast here, but a few years earlier, I had run Seltzer Video Productions because the Seltzer branding is obviously never ends, right? It's always something with Seltzer. Long story short, I think it started off when I was working at a company and someone wanted, this was like 2003, 2004 or so, they wanted like a video slideshow of like their still pictures. So I would like scan pictures, I would put music over it, put it in like Video Studio or something like that, and they get like a QuickTime or a movie file so they can kind of like, watch it or experience it in a different way. And then I started doing things where I would transfer people's like VHSs or home movies to DVD and then digitizing stuff. I mean, very quickly, like Walgreens put me out of business because you could do it super cheap and like at no time, just drop it up Walgreens, or like Legacy Box, I think is one of those services, stuff like that. So after like 2 or 3 years, I decided, you know what, this is not worth my time and I'm not making much money on it. So it wasn't really worth it, which was my thesis. Basically, I had to talk about the whole business I did, walk through it. And then I said at the end, like, and that's why I put the company out of business, because I realized that as a one-man show, it's just not going to work. So where am I going with that one? I'm not really sure, but that's basically what happened, right?
You learned something.
I guess I learned something. I learned a way to formalize or, document the business that I had. I did have a sole proprietorship at one point, so I was able to take like checks made out of Seltzer Video Productions, which was pretty exciting.
That's cool.
I had seltzervp.com at one point. I mean, that I did have jeffseltzer.com at the same time as well, but lots of websites and
Naturally.
my life. I'm the sponsor of the show, so I mean, I should plug it whenever I can. Yeah. With that said, though, I mean, like what I was trying to get at was the fact that like I respect and appreciate the fact that you went to grad school for something that you had a passion for. You learned a lot from it, and even coming out of it, you still really enjoyed it. It seems like, because then even so, without sharing too much, you did eventually get a role in sustainability for our current employer, which is fascinating.
Yeah, it was like, I feel like I was kind of a dog with a bone after that, or kind of during that program. I knew like the global impact and the global nature of sustainability was really intriguing. So I kind of set my sights on a global role and was able to have a bit of experience in a global sustainability role, which was very cool.
Awesome. So with that said, we've gone over a lot. We've definitely shared a lot. We've had a lot of great stories. I've really enjoyed this. So again, Kim, thank you for joining. Is there anything or anyone you want to support, promote, shout out, or whatever it is that Kim Hunter wants to do?
Oh, no. Well, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Of course.
Out of my normal routine on a podcast. So thanks. I guess if you want to check me out on Instagram, I'm at Kim Hunter 1111 on Instagram. So always come over and check out the photography. Always posting little adventures over there. But otherwise, thanks so much for having me. It was great to catch up.
Of course, I appreciate you coming on, Kim. So thank you so much. So once again, I want to remind everybody at home or wherever you happen to be listening right now, we are available on all podcast platforms. So make sure to tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, whoever you want to tell. Make sure they find us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and pretty much anywhere else you can find podcasts. On Instagram, you can find us at Everybody Has a Story Pod. Remember, you can find Kim Hunter at Kim Hunter 1111 because she really likes that number a lot. My personal Instagram is at Seltzer77 for all things Jeff Seltzer. You can always check me out at jeffseltzer.com, the official sponsor of this show. You can email the show directly at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. Next week, I'm sure I'll have another amazing guest like I had this week and like I had last week. So with that said, reach out, have a great day, and we'll talk soon. Thank you, everybody. Take care.